Welcome into the Thunder Basketball universe. This podcast, it's all about Jaylin Williams, the one who is probably the loudest barker, I would say, on the team. He didn't start it, but he was definitely like a massive leader of the pack.
This is one of those things that when, people ask about, what makes these players unique? What makes them like an NBA player? What's like a standout skill? We sometimes think about very basketball-y things.
Mm-hmm.
How do they shoot the ball? Can they dribble? Can they defend? Can they one of J. Will's actual skills is the booming nature of his voice. As a center, you need to be able to call out coverages in a clear way that your teammates can hear when there are 18,000 people screaming. Having a big booming voice is like a really important quality.
Very important.
And that's just not something that people really talk about as this is an innate ability that this player has. But these are the things that teams scout on. They go to these gyms and they sit there and they say are his teammates able to hear him? When he's communicating coverages, can his, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily something that was part of the Thunder's evaluation, but the point remains, this is like part of the J. Will package.
Yes.
Yep.
And also, you could hear him cheering for his teammates on the opposite side of the court as well. Just VP of vibes, Jaylin Williams. Just incredible energy.
What was it? Fire and fun?
That
Aaron Wiggins said about him?
That's right. So we've got a stat from J. Will this season, something that made us look, an awesome quote from his end of season interview, and a bless your timeline. A really strong season for J. Will. Saw some new stuff this season from him. Let's get into our stat of the season. Nick, what did you choose for J. Will?
Mine was 28. 28 assists. I'll give you a hint.
Well, that's not in one game.
Not in one game.
Is that how? During like a time span?
The entire season.
28 assists the whole season?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
To a specific player.
Oh. I was like, he had to have had more than 28 assists.
He definitely had more than 28 assists.
28 assists to Isaiah Joe.
That is correct.
And that's the most that he had to a player?
So, Isaiah Joe was assisted 28 times by J. Will.
Wow, okay.
That is the second most of any player to assist Isaiah Joe. Shea was number one. Shea delivered the most assists to Isaiah. J. Will was number two. You flip that around. Isaiah Joe had the second most assists for J. Will buckets.
Are you serious?
Yes. So those two guys, these Fort Smithians, I don't even know if that's the correct term,
I don't think so.
but I thought it was really, great synchronicity there that those two guys had the second most assists out of any player to one another.
And it kind of makes sense. J. Will, an excellent passer.
Right.
Great facilitator, something that we learned about him very early on. And Isaiah Joe, this guy who just lights out from behind the arc. If there's any sort of pick and pop action between those two, of course it's going to end in a made basket, or a pick and roll action between those two. Made bucket each time. But I remember several plays with J. Will where Isaiah was cutting. He was on the move and J. Will found him. So just, it goes to show J. Will's facilitating prowess and his ability to kind of facilitate from that nail, but also Isaiah and just the connection that he's got with J. Will.
A little two-man game stuff too, because the one that really stunned me was the assists, the Isaiah Joe assists to J. Will.
Yeah.
Were the second most of any player to J. Will. And so that means some of that action was kind of coming back to J. Will as well. So some of that handoff action that you see out top, maybe a flip back pass from Isaiah, a short dive or a roll towards the rim. So I thought that whole dynamic was something that I was really latched onto all season long.
I think we have one brain. I think we do, truly, because my stat also has a very strong Fort Smith tie. Okay. It's 19. Does that sound familiar?
It sounds familiar from another pod that we have recorded to this point, whether or not you're hearing it already, have heard it already.
Spoiler alert.
But this has got to be charges, right?
Charges drawn by Jaylin Williams during the regular season. The other person who also had 19 charges drawn during the regular season, Isaiah Joe. Okay.
These two guys do everything.
They do everything. And there's something in the water. Yeah. Because also, that 19 charges drawn tied for 6th in the entire NBA.
Wild.
So both of these guys in the top 10 in the NBA in charges drawn, they're not playing the most minutes out there on the floor, but it goes to show when they are out there and they are, put in positions defensively to protect the rim, they're gonna sacrifice their body. They're not scared to shy away from that contact whatsoever. And Jay Will has more of a reason to not shy away from that contact than Isaiah Joe does. Like, Isaiah Joe has more of a reason to like make a business decision in those sort of situations. But he doesn't shy away from it at all. And so like that Fort Smith just kind of mentality of like, being willing to get your jersey a little bit dirty.
They're willing to hit the deck.
That's right.
Maybe those floorboards in Fort Smith were a little bit softer. I don't know. But those guys are not
a little more forgiving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just thought that was such a unique stat. These guys have such a cool connection. All right, let's get into Made You Look.
Okay.
Mine, I could not stop thinking about it ever since Coach Dagnall told us this story. So Jaylin Williams came into the NBA not known as like a knockdown shooter.
No.
He actually, during his time in Arkansas, he shot 30% from three his freshman year and then shot 24% from three his sophomore season. And so coming into the NBA and coming into the to the Thunder organization, the OKC didn't really have 3-point shooting as like part of the overall picture for Jay Will and like his potential role out there on the floor. Coach Dagnall was like, Jay Will just started shooting threes in practice. Just started shooting them and making them. And sometimes when a player just shows you, what they're capable of, what their vision of themselves is, you gotta listen to them.
Yeah,
just let them do what, and if they're doing it comfortably and, within the flow of, our system and style, sometimes you just gotta let them rock.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Coach Dagnall let Jay Will do. And lo and behold, this guy comes in and starts shooting 40% from the 3-point line his rookie season, and then backs it up with 38% this year.
Basketball play style for individuals and teams is not necessarily a top-down phenomenon.
Right.
It bubbles up from the bottom. It's these guys are showing you what they're capable of, and then we orient some of our team and our strategies based on what they're capable of.
Yes.
Mark Dagnall has talked about the cutting for this Thunder team, which has been a revelation. It's been one of the best aspects of this team over the last few years, actually being more of a result of the team really struggling to get some good spacing on the floor because they weren't shooting the ball well from behind the 3-point line a few years ago. This is another example of, okay, what's coming up, what's bubbling up from underneath. Okay, Jay Will, let's experiment with this 3-point shooting. Let's see what happens. Well, now all of a sudden the Thunder can play stylistically this year basically the same way in the first unit and in the second unit with Jay Will as that pick and pop 5-man, the same way that they ran Chet Holmgren in the starting unit.
So when you hear Sam Presti or when you hear Coach Dagnall say things like, we want to be open-minded.
Yeah.
We don't want to close ourselves off to any, information. We don't want to put boxes around players. This is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Where if the Thunder were just kind of, locked in and stubborn on their vision for Jay Will, we wouldn't have seen this.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
That's 53 3-pointers this season that we wouldn't have seen go through the rim because of, arrogance or whatever. And so the Thunder, this is their philosophy. Just remain open-minded and be nimble and adaptive. And so if something like this pops up, we can take advantage of it.
Expand the menu, don't contract it.
Exactly.
And there's always, there's a time for a contraction, but in general, you want to, this goes back to something that we talked about with Sam. He said, it's one thing to try to figure out what you need. It's more important to know what you have and it's to know where you are. That self-orientation is critical. And so there was a process of exploration that is still going to continue. And the Thunder is not some sort of finished product. What Jay Will has done in year 2 as a player could be different than year 3. There might be some threes that the Thunder wants to take out of his arsenal.
Right.
The same way that there are some with Lou Dort. There might be more threes that they want to inject into his arsenal. We don't know, but they're going to keep exploring that.
It was just such a cool story. Also the confidence from Jay Will, in an NBA practice for the first time, just to be like, I can do this. I'm going to do it. Like, I don't need permission. I'm just going to start launching these. And it worked out great. I just thought that was a great story. What made you look?
Mine was some of his defense this year on the 2 meetings that the Thunder had out in Denver against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. He played a little bit of a different role in some of those games than we saw him play throughout the course of the season. Yeah. The Thunder played 92 minutes this year during the regular season with both Jay Will and Chet on the floor together at the same time.
Wow.
Played about 14 minutes in the playoffs. So tick that up even if you just think about it from like a percentage of minutes standpoint in the playoffs. But what they saw was an opportunity in that Denver series. And if you think about it, there's some really great logic to it. To have Jay Will be a primary defender on Nikola Jokic, to just have that size and physicality to get up underneath Jokic to prevent him from being able to back down all the way to the rim, and then have Chet as sort of a weak side defender to protect against lobs backdoor from Aaron Gordon, to be able to protect from cutters diving through the lane, and to be able to send some other double teams over. Something that the Thunder did in those meetings was they would have Jay Will as the primary defender. They'd send a double over from the top side instead of from the baseline, really cutting off some of the passing that Jokic could do. And then you had Chet kind of roaming on the backside. That was really effective. The Thunder won 3 out of 4 meetings against Denver. And it just goes to show, like, here's a second-round pick who's playing a pivotal role in some crucial wins against a division opponent who was the defending champion. The Thunder ends up winning the division by a tiebreaker, becomes the youngest team ever to become the number 1 seed in the conference because of a tiebreaker. Again, and they had to win these 3 out of 4 games against the Denver Nuggets to do it.
Just so impactful and in a very kind of unique way and niche way. And I remember early on, I think at the very start of the season, Coach Dagnall really wanted to start getting a look at the double big lineup. And Jay Will wasn't available, so it was Olivier Sarr who he used alongside Chet Holmgren. So this was like in the works, in the making, something that the Thunder wanted to kind of formulate and get an idea of that really paid off big time down the stretch of the season. Let's get into our Shay That Again for Jay Will. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
You go first.
Okay. Mine was actually from one of the walk-off interviews that I had that really went viral was when Shea was, listing off all of the ways in which he was consistent. And, he's like, I'm consistent with what I eat, how I prepare for games, who I keep around me, all this stuff. But another underrated answer in that post-game walk-off interview was because, if you remember in that one, J-Dub and Jay Will were standing behind him and they lost their minds when they started talking about
oh my gosh.
But, that was a win against Miami at home, really hard-fought game, very low-scoring game.
Great game.
And it was the first game that Jay Will was back after missing some time with an injury.
It was a hard-nosed game. That team brings the physicality every night. We had our bruiser back. He was back. He made big plays. And we got a W tonight.
That was, really a cool quote from Shea in that situation to say, hey, this is a guy that really makes an impact on that aspect of our team.
Coach Dagnall did a really good job of explaining this because Jay Will, when you think of him out there, you think you could put him on Nikola Jokic and Nikola Jokic is going to feel him. That is going to be a great kind of bruising matchup to use Shay's words. But in addition to that, Coach Dagnall throughout the season was very, clear about saying Jay Will is not just brute force.
Right.
He definitely brings that to the table and look out. But also this guy has very sophisticated kind of IQ out there on the floor. And we talked about earlier in the assists, that playmaking, that facilitating, seeing the floor, his competitive IQ and just his energy that he brings. It's all a very well-rounded kind of player and play style that Jay Will brings to the floor.
Yeah. And it's just, sometimes you want a redundancy of skills. You want guys that can come in and replicate what one another do. That's why you've got, Lou Dort and Cason Wallace. Those two guys but then sometimes it's really helpful to have players like Jay Will who bring a different style and skill set than Chet Holmgren does.
Right.
And so now they can play similar roles on offense, but defensively they can play somewhat different styles. That gives you just more optionality.
Here is my Shay That Again.
Okay.
And this one is actually from Jay Will's end of season interview. I think it was the first words out of his mouth. I think you asked the question, actually.
To me, I don't look at it as a role. I'm just being myself.
That's just Jay Will. And it just infused so much into this team. Go back and look. Go back and look. This is a challenge for all of you true TBU watchers out there. Go back and look at the walk-off interviews this season and count how many Jay Will are in.
He's got to
the
be
Thunder
in almost
won
every
57 games this season. There are 57 walk-off interviews, and I guarantee you Jay Will is shooting something like 79% of those.
He's got to be in at least 45 or so of those 57 walk-offs in the 6 others in the postseason.
Oh, so, for sure. Yeah, just always in the background, always smiling, always just hyping up teammates, grabbing other teammates and bringing them into interviews. Just great energy from Jay Will this season.
Messing with me before on my opening hit of the game broadcast right before tip-off.
That's so fun. Yes. And I don't know, because sometimes he does it before the camera is on, but he's always making sure he's dust on the shoulders. Making sure you're all straightened out.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Good looking out, Jay Will. Thank you very much.
And also great by you to. I would jump if he did that to me. Okay, it's just Jay Will. Yeah, this big presence coming up behind me. Boom, boom, boom.
It kind of got me going. It kind of got me going for the game. It was like, all right, I'm in it now. Like, ready to go.
Rock and roll. It's so good. All right. Let's get into bless your timeline. There's so many options for Jay Will this season. And the one that really made me smile was hearing Jay Will talk about his dad.
Yeah.
And so in his end of season interviews, he explained, I'm always looking at my dad when we're playing the pregame video up on the scoreboard in the arena. He said, no matter how many games he's coming. He comes to every home game. He records every game. This is what got me. This is what got me. So we learned about Jay Will growing up in Fort Smith, Arkansas. His dad, even if Jay Will was just out in the backyard playing 21 with his friends, just a casual sort of pickup game, Jay Will's dad would be in the kitchen, get his phone out, and record through the kitchen window.
Through the window. Trying to get some game tape.
Exactly. Yeah. And then go back to Jay Will after and be like, all right, you see this move that you made here? You should really, and
work
coach
on your
him up.
Footwork here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he would do that with every single minute that Jay Will would play a game, period. High school, college. My thing is there's League Pass.
Right.
You don't have to do that anymore.
Even the intro video on the scoreboard, we got to be able to get that to him. He doesn't need to be holding the camera up that whole time. But no, it just goes to show the humanity of these people and how many of your parents out there would be doing the exact same thing.
Oh, my dad would do the same thing, 100%.
I've seen your pops in the stands and your mom in the stands doing,
You got the phone out. Yeah. My dad would bring a backpack to all of my AAU games, a backpack and a tripod, because he was the camera guy for every single game.
Oh, my grandmother's hitting me up all the time wondering how to get the League Pass to work.
Yes.
It's this is how special these things are and these moments are and the dream that has come true already just to be to this point and then to get to actually live it out with their son is just so special.
And also Jay Will's dad still coaching him up, still helping out in any way that he can, and is always at every game. Just really cool to see that connection, that bond is just so strong between those two.
I'm so glad that you brought up his dad, because my bless your timeline is something very similar. It's actually a quote from end of season interviews that Jay Will said, a lot of his nature and what's come out from him is because of his teammates.
They bring that out of me. They let me be free and be myself around them. So it's just me out there having fun. I try to lighten the situation a lot of times, yell at them, joke around, just try to have fun with whatever we're doing.
This really echoes something that Jay Will and his dad both have said about Mark Dagnall and about just being here at the Thunder too. They said that Jay Will just plays better when he feels confidence from his coaches, from his teammates. And that's not a rare thing, but basically when his teammates, when his coaches, when anybody around him says you just go be you, go be free, go, be yourself out there. That's when he's really at his best, as opposed to maybe being put in a tighter box. Not to compare players, but you could see some other guys on this Thunder team who are much more blinders on. Here, give me some parameters and I will go be excellent in this. And I will you tell me exactly what you need me to do and I will do it to a T. For Jay Will, it's much more about being hey, in order to be great, I need to be vibes.
Yeah.
And that's what we've really seen from him.
Yeah.
Going back for the last 18 months or so.
It's so cool to see that like he has a connection. Genuinely, it seems, with every single human being in that Thunder locker room. Yeah. Like you could just go from guy to guy, and all of these guys have such an appreciation for the vibes that he brings. Just VP of vibes. That's VP kind of vibes. That's his job title with this team. Also Bruiser.
Yeah. Give him that on his little desk, little desk plate for him.
Jay Will, VP of vibes. That's awesome. This offseason for Jay Will, as with all of these guys, in the gym, in the lab, working hard. I imagine you're going to spend some time in Fort Smith. We spent some time with him in Fort Smith last summer.
Yep.
So we can imagine we might see a little more of that this summer as well. And we'll be really interested to see what things look like come, next season for Jay Will.
That's right.
Great stuff on the horizon. That wraps up this episode all about Jay Will. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, thunder up and catch you later.